The first alien ship appeared in Earth's solar system on a Tuesday morning. It was massive, easily 3 times larger than anything humans had ever built. The ship moved slowly past Jupiter, sending peaceful signals on every frequency Earth's satellites could detect. The message was simple. They wanted to talk. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center at Luna Station watching the alien vessel approach. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, someone who had spent 40 years in Earth's Navy. Next to him stood Lisa Carter, Earth's chief diplomat. She was younger with short brown hair and sharp features. Both of them knew this moment would change everything. "They're requesting permission to dock," reported Lieutenant Kevin Park from his station. "Signal is coming through clean." "They seem to understand our language." Morrison nodded. "Grant permission. All weapon systems stay on standby, but keep them hidden. We don't want to look hostile." 3 hours later, the alien delegation walked through Luna Station's main corridor. They were tall, graceful beings with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms. Their leader introduced himself as Ambassador Kethra of the Altarian Republic. He wore what looked like ceremonial robes and carried a small device that translated his words into perfect English. "We come seeking help," Kethra began once they reached the conference room. His voice was deep and musical even through the translator. "Our people face extinction. The entire galaxy is under threat." Lisa Carter leaned forward. "Tell us what's happening." The ambassador activated a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with huge sections marked in red. "The Vorth Collective has conquered 47 star systems in the past 10 years. They are unstoppable. Their military is efficient, brutal, and grows stronger with each world they take." Morrison studied the display. The red zones covered nearly half of the visible galaxy. "How many species are fighting them?" 12 major civilizations are part of our Federation Defense Force," Kethra replied. "We have lost every major battle for the past 3 years. Our soldiers are brave, but we are losing hope." Another alien stepped forward. This one was shorter, with gray skin and large dark eyes. "I am General Zeth Cole. I have commanded Federation forces in 7 battles against the Vorth. Each time we follow proper military protocol. Each time they defeat us." Lisa exchanged a glance with Morrison. Something about the way the general spoke bothered her. "What do you mean by proper military protocol?" "The Galactic Warfare Convention," Zeth Cole explained proudly. "Rules established by civilized species over thousands of years. We fight with honor. We protect civilians. We treat prisoners fairly. We engage only in designated combat zones." Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "And the Vorth follow these rules too?" "They do," the general confirmed. "That is what makes their efficiency so frightening. They win while still following the conventions. Their soldiers are perfectly disciplined. They never break formation. They never retreat without orders. They fight like machines." The human admiral sat back in his chair. He was beginning to understand something the aliens didn't. "Tell me about a typical battle." Zeth Cole activated another display. It showed tactical formations, neat lines of ships facing each other across empty space. Standard engagement. Both fleets position themselves according to convention. We exchange communications about terms of battle. Then we fight until one side achieves tactical superiority or requests surrender. "How long do these battles usually last?" Lisa asked. "Anywhere from 6 hours to 3 days, the general replied. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted nearly a week. Both sides showed great courage and skill." Morrison stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see Earth in the distance, a blue marble floating in space. "And after the battle ends, the losing side evacuates their surviving forces. The winning side takes control of the system. Civilian populations are processed according to convention standards." "Processed how?" Ambassador Kethra answered this time. "The Vorth relocate civilian populations to designated worlds where they can continue their lives under collective rule. It is more efficient than governing conquered planets directly." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "They're moving entire populations?" "Yes, but they follow the conventions," Kethra insisted. "No unnecessary killing. No destruction of cultural sites. They are ruthless but not barbaric." Morrison turned back to face the aliens. "What exactly are you asking from Earth?" "We need soldiers," General Zeth Cole said immediately. 50,000 of your best military personnel. Our intelligence suggests humans are skilled warriors. With your help, we might be able to match the Vorth's numerical advantage." "You want our people to fight in your conventional battles," Morrison said slowly. Yes, we have transport ships ready to carry human forces to the front lines. We can provide standard Federation weapons and equipment. Your soldiers would be integrated into our existing command structure. Lisa looked at Morrison. Both of them were thinking the same thing. These aliens had no idea what they were asking for. Morrison sat back down. Tell me about the Vorth soldiers. What makes them so effective? Perfect discipline, Zethkol replied. They follow orders without question. Their formations never break. They advance and retreat as commanded. They fight with honor and precision. Have you tried anything besides conventional battles? The general looked confused. What else would we try? The conventions exist for good reasons. They prevent unnecessary destruction. They protect civilian populations. They maintain order in warfare. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, what happens if you lose this war? Ambassador Kethra's shoulders sagged. The Vorth will control the entire galaxy within 5 years. Billions of beings will be relocated to processing worlds. Our cultures, our histories, our ways of life will be preserved in their archives, but our freedom will be gone forever. Lisa leaned forward. And you believe 50,000 human soldiers can change the outcome of this war? We hope so, Kethra said desperately. We have heard stories about human conflicts. You have experience with warfare. Your species has survived many battles. Morrison almost smiled at that. Yes, we have experience with warfare. The room fell silent. The aliens waited hopefully while the humans considered their request. Finally, Lisa spoke. We need time to discuss this with our government. The decision to send human forces into a galactic war is not something we can make quickly. Of course, Ambassador Kethra agreed. But please understand, time is not on our side. The Vorth advance continues. Every day we delay, more worlds fall. After the aliens left for their guest quarters, Morrison and Lisa remained in the conference room. They have no idea what they're asking for, Lisa said quietly. Morrison nodded. They think warfare is some kind of gentleman's game. Rules and honor and fair play. The Vorth sound dangerous, but they're playing by the same rules. Exactly. Both sides are fighting the same kind of war their ancestors fought thousands of years ago. Lisa walked to the display showing the galactic map. The red zone seemed to pulse with threat. Should we help them? Morrison was quiet for a moment. They asked for soldiers. Yes, they want 50,000 people to fight conventional battles against an enemy that's better at conventional warfare. That's what they're asking for. Morrison looked at the map again. We could send soldiers. We could follow their rules and fight their kind of war. Or we could actually help them win. Lisa understood. The difference was important. These aliens wanted Earth to join their losing war. They wanted human soldiers to die in the same hopeless battles that were already failing. But Morrison was suggesting something else entirely. They asked for soldiers, he repeated. But what they really need is for this war to end. And soldiers aren't the same thing as people who end wars. No, they're not. Lisa looked at Morrison. What are you thinking? The Admiral's expression was cold and calculating. I'm thinking these aliens are about to learn the difference between warfare and war. 3 months after the first meeting with the alien delegation, the U.S. Retribution dropped out of hyperspace near the Federation military base at Kepler Station. The ship was smaller than what the aliens expected, sleek and dark with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It carried 5,000 humans instead of the 50,000 that had been requested. General Zethkol waited in the docking bay with a full honor guard of Federation soldiers. They stood in perfect formation, weapons gleaming, uniforms pressed and spotless. The general expected to see similar discipline from the human forces. The first human off the ship was Colonel Sam Blake. He was average height with dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to notice everything. His uniform was plain black with no decorations. Behind him came Major Amy Rodriguez, a woman with short red hair and the kind of quiet confidence that made people step back without knowing why. General Zethkol, Blake said, extending his hand. Thank you for hosting us. The general took the offered hand, surprised by the firm grip. Colonel Blake, we are honored by your presence, though I must admit we were expecting more personnel. Quality over quantity, Blake replied with a slight smile. We brought exactly what you need. As more humans filed off the ship, Zethkol began to feel uneasy. These didn't look like the soldiers he was familiar with. They moved differently, quieter somehow. Their equipment was strange, with weapons and gear he didn't recognize. Many of them had scars or tattoos. Some looked too young to be soldiers, while others seemed too old. Major Rodriguez noticed his confusion. "Is there a problem, General?" "No problem," Zethkol said quickly. "I simply expected your forces to look more standardized." Blake laughed, but it wasn't a warm sound. "We don't really do standardized." The human contingent finished disembarking. Zethkol counted them quickly. Barely 5,000 people total. Among them, he noticed some who barely looked like military personnel at all. One was a thin man with glasses who looked like a scientist. Another was a woman who couldn't be older than 25 but had the dead eyes of someone who had seen too much. "Perhaps we should proceed to the briefing room," Zethkol suggested. The briefing room was large and formal, with holographic displays showing the current military situation. Ambassador Kethra was already there, along with several other Federation commanders. They all looked expectantly at the human force. Blake took a seat at the table while his people spread out around the room. Rodriguez remained standing behind his chair. The other humans didn't sit in formation or stand at attention. They simply positioned themselves wherever they wanted, some leaning against walls, others sitting on the floor. This casual behavior disturbed the Federation officers, but they said nothing. "Colonel Blake," Zethkol began, "let me introduce some of your key personnel to our staff." Blake nodded. "Major Rodriguez here handles tactical operations. Sergeant Tony Reeves specializes in close combat and infiltration." He pointed to a large man with multiple scars across his face. "Lieutenant Kelly Brooks manages information warfare and psychological operations." The young woman with dead eyes stepped forward slightly. "Captain Rick Manning coordinates special reconnaissance." Each human Blake introduced made the alien officers more uncomfortable. These weren't the disciplined soldiers they expected. These people looked dangerous in ways that went beyond simple military training. "Very good," Zethkol said, trying to maintain his composure. "Now let us discuss the current tactical situation." The holographic display activated, showing the latest battle reports. Red zones indicated Vorth-controlled territory, which had expanded since the humans left Earth. "The Vorth have taken 3 more systems," Zethkol explained. "They are moving toward the Centauri cluster, which contains 12 billion civilian inhabitants. We must stop them before they reach those worlds." Blake studied the display. "What's your current battle plan?" "Standard Federation assault doctrine. We will position our fleet here." Zethkol pointed to a spot on the display. "And challenge the Vorth forces to conventional engagement. With your additional personnel, we should have numerical equality." Blake was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "How many Federation soldiers have you lost in these conventional engagements?" "Approximately 2 million over the past 3 years," the general replied proudly. "They died with honor following proper military protocol." 2 million dead," Blake repeated softly. "Yes, the price of freedom is always high. But we maintain our principles even in defeat." Blake looked around the room at his people. Several of them exchanged glances. Major Rodriguez shook her head almost imperceptibly. "General," Blake said finally, "we appreciate your tactical briefing, but we won't be participating in your conventional assault." The room fell silent. Zethkol stared at the human colonel. "I don't understand." "Your plan will fail," Blake said simply. "You'll lose more ships, more people, and the Vorth will take the Centauri cluster anyway." Ambassador Kethra leaned forward. "Then what do you suggest?" Blake stood up and walked to the holographic display. "We're not going to fight a battle. We're going to end this war." "How?" Blake pointed to the Vorth-controlled systems. "Sergeant Reeves, what do you see when you look at this?" The scarred man stepped forward. "Target-rich environment, multiple insertion points, divided command structure. Enemy forces spread thin across 47 systems," Lieutenant Brooks added. "Psychological profile suggests hierarchical society. Remove leadership and lower levels lose cohesion." Captain Manning studied the display. "No apparent security protocols for high-value targets. They're fighting an honorable war, so they're not protecting against dishonorable tactics." The Federation officers looked increasingly confused and alarmed. "What are you talking about?" Zethkol demanded. Blake turned back to face him. "We're talking about actually winning this war instead of just fighting more battles." "But the conventions don't apply to us," Major Rodriguez interrupted. "We never signed your galactic warfare agreements." Ambassador Kethra stood up. "You must follow the conventions. They exist to prevent unnecessary destruction and protect civilian populations. Blake's expression didn't change. How many civilians have the Vorth relocated in the past 3 years? Approximately 8 billion, Kethra admitted. And how many have died during these relocations? The ambassador was uncomfortable. Some deaths are inevitable during large-scale population transfers. Perhaps 50 million. 50 million civilians dead because you're following the conventions, Blake said coldly. Tell me again how well your rules are protecting people. The room was silent. The Federation officers had never thought about it that way. Major Rodriguez activated her own display device. Here's what we're going to do instead. The holographic display changed, showing detailed intelligence about Vorth military structure, supply lines, and command hierarchies. Where did you get this information? Zethkal asked in shock. We've been gathering intelligence for 3 months, Rodriguez replied. While you were preparing for another conventional battle, we were studying the enemy. Blake pointed to specific locations on the display. The Vorth Collective is controlled by a council of 12 regional commanders. These commanders coordinate all military operations. Remove them and their entire military structure collapses. You want to assassinate their leadership? Ambassador Kethra looked horrified. We want to end this war, Blake corrected. The fastest way to do that is to eliminate the Vorth's ability to coordinate attacks. General Zethkal shook his head vigorously. This is completely against convention. Targeted killing of commanders is considered dishonorable. It violates every principle of civilized warfare. Blake looked at him for a long moment. General, how long have you been fighting this war? 15 years. How many more years are you willing to fight? As long as necessary to preserve our principles. Blake nodded slowly. That's the difference between us. You're willing to fight forever as long as you can feel good about how you fought. We fight to win. Lieutenant Brooks stepped forward. With respect, General, your principles have gotten 50 million civilians killed and 2 million of your soldiers. Maybe it's time to try something different. But without the conventions, warfare becomes barbaric, Kethra protested. Civilization itself depends on maintaining honor in combat. Sergeant Reeves laughed a harsh sound. Honor doesn't mean much when your entire species is extinct. Blake raised his hand for silence. We understand your concerns. But you asked Earth for help winning this war. We're offering to win it. How? Zethkal asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Major Rodriguez manipulated the display, showing insertion routes and target priorities. Small teams. Surgical strikes. We take out their command structure, disrupt their supply lines, and create enough chaos to break their military cohesion. You're talking about terror tactics, Ambassador Kethra said quietly. Blake's expression hardened. We're talking about effective tactics. There's a difference. The Federation officers looked at each other uncertainly. Everything the humans proposed went against their fundamental beliefs about warfare. What if we refuse? General Zethkal asked. Blake shrugged. Then you continue fighting conventional battles until the Vorth eventually wear you down. We'll observe and report back to Earth. And if we agree? The industrial world of Theta 7 had been under Vorth control for 8 months. 200,000 Vorth soldiers guarded the massive mining facilities that produced rare metals, essential to their war effort. The planet's surface was covered with extraction sites, processing plants, and defensive positions that made conventional assault impossible. General Zethkal stood in the command center of the Federation fleet, studying tactical displays with growing frustration. A direct assault would require at least 500,000 troops and result in enormous casualties. Even then, success would not be guaranteed. Ambassador Kethra nodded grimly. The Vorth have turned Theta 7 into a fortress. Our intelligence suggests they could hold out for years if besieged. Colonel Blake entered the command center with Major Rodriguez and several of his specialists. The human officers looked relaxed, almost casual, in stark contrast to the tension radiating from their alien counterparts. Status report on Theta 7? Blake asked. The situation is hopeless, Zethkal replied. We would need overwhelming force to take that world, and we simply don't have it. Blake studied the tactical display for a few moments. How long would a conventional assault take? Assuming we could even mount one successfully, perhaps 6 months of siege warfare. The casualties would be horrific. And how many Federation civilians are on the planet? Ambassador Kethra checked his datapad. Approximately 50,000 in labor camps. The Vorth are using them to operate the mining equipment. Blake nodded and turned to his team. Sergeant Reeves, what do you need? The scarred man looked at the display. 48 hours of complete communication blackout. No Federation ships in the system. No monitoring, no check-ins, no rescue attempts if things go wrong. General Zeth Cole stared at him. 48 hours? You want us to abandon the system for 2 days? That's right, Blake confirmed. Pull all Federation forces back beyond sensor range. Don't try to contact us. Don't send anyone to help us. Just wait. How many of your people are you sending? Kethra asked. Major Rodriguez answered. 50. The silence in the command center was absolute. Finally, Zeth Cole found his voice. 50 soldiers against 200,000? This is suicide, Blake shrugged. Maybe, but you said the situation was hopeless anyway. What exactly are you planning to do? Lieutenant Brooks stepped forward. We're going to solve the problem. How? Blake's expression was cold. You don't want to know. Trust me on this. Ambassador Kethra looked uncomfortable. Colonel, we need some idea of your tactical approach. We're responsible for approving military operations in Federation space. Your approval isn't required, Blake replied quietly. You asked for our help. We're giving it. The only question is whether you're going to interfere. The tension in the room was thick. The Federation officers realized they were losing control of the situation, but they also knew their conventional methods had failed completely. What about the civilian population? Kethra asked. Captain Manning spoke up. They'll be safer than they are right now. How can you guarantee that? Because we're professionals, Blake said simply. We don't accidentally kill the people we're trying to save. General Zeth Cole struggled with the decision. Everything about this operation violated Federation military doctrine, but they were desperate, and conventional tactics had failed at every turn. 48 hours, he said finally. Complete communications blackout. But if this fails, it won't fail, Blake interrupted. Pack your ships and pull back. We'll contact you when Theta 7 is secure. The next morning, the Federation fleet withdrew from the Theta 7 system. General Zeth Cole watched the long-range sensors until the last human ship disappeared from view. Then began the longest 48 hours of his military career. On Theta 7, the human operation began before dawn. 50 specialists moved through the darkness like ghosts, using equipment and techniques that would have seemed impossible to Federation observers. They had studied the planet for weeks, mapping every defensive position, every patrol route, every communication relay. The first Vorth sentries simply vanished. No alarms were raised, no shots were fired. One moment they were at their posts, the next they were gone. Their replacement shifts found empty positions and began searching, but they found nothing. Sergeant Reeves and his team moved through the main processing facility like shadows. The Vorth had built their defenses against conventional assault, with heavy weapons pointed outward and patrol patterns designed to stop large formations. They had never considered the possibility of infiltrators who could eliminate guards silently and move unseen through their own base. Lieutenant Brooks led a separate team to the communication center. Her specialty was psychological warfare, but she also understood electronic systems better than most engineers. Within 3 hours, she had taken control of the planet's entire communication network without anyone realizing it. The Vorth command structure began receiving false reports. Patrol teams reported normal activity. Sensor stations showed no unusual readings. Supply convoys confirmed regular deliveries. Everything appeared normal while the human teams systematically took apart their operation from the inside. Captain Manning's reconnaissance team moved through the civilian labor camps. The Federation prisoners were kept in basic but secure facilities, guarded by Vorth soldiers who followed standard protocols. Manning's team studied the guard rotations and security systems, preparing for the final phase of the operation. By the end of the first day, 30% of the Vorth command staff had disappeared. Not killed in battles or captured during raids, just gone. The remaining officers began to panic, but their communication systems had been compromised. Orders became confused. Supply lines were disrupted. The rigid hierarchy that made Vorth military so effective began to crumble. The second day brought complete chaos. Vorth soldiers found themselves without clear commands or reliable information. Their officers were missing. Their communication systems gave contradictory orders. Supply convoys failed to arrive. Defensive positions were abandoned as troops were redirected to search for threats they couldn't find. Staff Sergeant Nina Walsh coordinated the final phase of the operation. Her team had spent 2 days learning the exact layout of every important facility on the planet. Now they moved through the mining installations, disabling equipment and eliminating any remaining resistance. The Vorth soldiers never saw their attackers clearly. Glimpses of movement in corridors, the sound of footsteps that vanished when investigated, equipment that stopped working for no apparent reason. It was psychological warfare at its most effective, designed to break morale and destroy unit cohesion. By the evening of the second day, the remaining Vorth forces on Theta 7 were in complete disarray. Their command structure had collapsed. Their communication network was compromised. Their supply lines were cut. Many of them had stopped following orders entirely, instead huddling in defensive positions and waiting for an attack that never came the way they expected. The human teams began the final cleanup phase. Working in coordinated groups, they systematically secured every facility on the planet. Any Vorth soldiers who resisted were eliminated quickly and quietly. Those who surrendered were secured and prepared for eventual prisoner transfer. The civilian population was liberated without a single casualty. Most of them never even realized a battle was taking place. One day they were prisoners working in Vorth mining facilities. The next day human soldiers were escorting them to safe areas and treating their injuries. Exactly 48 hours after the communication blackout began, Colonel Blake sent a simple message to the Federation fleet. Theta 7 is secure. You can come back now. General Zethkol couldn't believe what he was hearing. Secure? What does that mean? It means the planet is under human control, Blake replied over the communication channel. All Vorth forces have been neutralized. The mining facilities are intact and operational. Civilian casualties are 0. The Federation fleet returned to find Theta 7 completely transformed. The Vorth defensive positions were empty. The mining facilities were running normally under human supervision. 50,000 Federation civilians were being cared for in temporary medical facilities. General Zethkol walked through the main processing plant with Colonel Blake, trying to understand what had happened. Where are the Vorth soldiers? He asked. Gone, Blake replied. Dead? Some of them. The ones who chose to fight? What about the others? Blake pointed to a large containment facility, secured and waiting for prisoner transfer. About 15,000 total. Zethkol did the math quickly, but there were 200,000 Vorth troops on this planet. Blake confirmed. Where are the rest? Blake's expression was unreadable. They chose to resist. The general felt a chill run through him. In 48 hours, 50 human soldiers had eliminated a force of 200,000. The implications were terrifying. How? Zethkol asked quietly. Major Rodriguez joined them. We identified their command structure and eliminated it. We disrupted their communications and supply lines. We created psychological pressure until their unit cohesion collapsed. Then we cleaned up the remaining resistance. This isn't warfare, Ambassador Kethra said, his voice shaking. This is something else entirely. Blake nodded. Yes, it is. It's effective. News of Theta 7's fall spread through both Federation and Vorth communication networks within days. The Vorth High Command had lost one of their most secure positions without understanding how it happened. 200,000 soldiers had simply vanished, along with 8 months of strategic mineral production. Supreme Commander Vorth Tal called an emergency meeting of the Collective Council. The massive Vorth leader stood before holographic displays showing the tactical situation, his 4 arms gesturing angrily as he spoke to his subordinates. Explain to me how an entire garrison disappears, he demanded. Our forces were following standard defensive protocols. The enemy showed no signs of massive troop buildup. Yet somehow 50,000 Federation soldiers overcame 200,000 of our best troops. Regional Commander Vorth Ken shifted uncomfortably. Supreme Commander, our intelligence suggests the attacking force was much smaller. Perhaps only a few thousand troops. Impossible. Our defensive analysis clearly shows that successful assault on Theta 7 would require overwhelming numerical advantage. Yes, Supreme Commander. That is what our calculations indicated, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Vorth Tal studied the reports again. Something about this defeat was different from previous Federation attacks. The humans had not followed any recognizable battle pattern. Instead of direct assault, they had somehow eliminated the garrison from within. What do we know about these new Federation allies? He asked. Very little, Supreme Commander. They call themselves humans. They appeared to be a recently contacted species from a system called Sol. Physical capabilities seemed similar to other Federation races. Vorthtal made a decision that would prove to be a critical mistake. If the Federation believes they can use terror tactics against us, we will show them the true meaning of terror. Order all regional commanders to begin immediate execution of civilian populations on worlds we control. 10,000 executions per day until the Federation returns to conventional warfare. The order went out through Vorth communication networks within hours. On 12 different worlds, Vorth forces began systematic killing of Federation civilian prisoners. The message was clear. Abandon these new tactics or watch millions die. When news of the massacres reached the Federation fleet, the response was immediate outrage. Ambassador Kethra called for an emergency meeting, his voice shaking with anger and grief. "They're killing innocent people because of what happened at Theta 7, he told the assembled officers. "We must return to conventional warfare immediately to save civilian lives." General Zeth Cole nodded grimly. "The humans have forced the Vorth to abandon the conventions. Now everyone suffers." Colonel Blake entered the briefing room with his usual calm demeanor, but something had changed in his expression. Major Rodriguez followed him, along with several other human officers. Their faces showed a cold anger that made the Federation officers step back instinctively. "We heard about the executions," Blake said quietly. "Yes," Kethra replied. "The Vorth are retaliating for your unconventional tactics. We must return to conventional warfare to protect civilian populations." Blake was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "They want to change the rules. What do you mean?" General Zethkol asked. Major Rodriguez answered. "The Vorth just declared that they're willing to target civilians directly. They've abandoned their own conventions, which means we're no longer constrained by them either," added Lieutenant Brooks, her dead eyes now blazing with controlled fury. Ambassador Kethra looked confused. "I don't understand. You were never following the conventions anyway." Blake's expression grew colder. "There's a difference between ignoring your conventions and abandoning all restraint. The Vorth just crossed a line they can't uncross." "What are you talking about?" Zethkal demanded. Sergeant Reeves stepped forward. "Up until now, we've been playing nice. Surgical strikes, minimal casualties, professional operations. But if they want to target civilians..." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like a physical threat. Blake activated his personal communication device. "All team leaders, priority briefing in 1 hour. Operation parameters have changed. Full authorization for all methods." The Federation officers heard responses from human commanders throughout the fleet. The voices were calm and professional, but underneath was something that made even experienced military officers nervous. "Colonel Blake," Ambassador Kethra said carefully, "what exactly are you planning?" Blake looked at him with eyes that showed no warmth at all. "We're going to end this war. How? By removing the Vorth's ability to continue fighting." "What does that mean?" Blake's smile was terrifying. "It means they chose to play by human rules. Now they get to see what human rules actually look like." Within hours, human teams were deploying across Vorth-controlled space, using methods and equipment the Federation had never seen before. These weren't the careful, surgical operations of Theta 7. These were something entirely different. Commander Alex Stone led the intelligence operation that mapped the entire Vorth command structure in less than a week. His team didn't just identify military targets. They found the locations of every Vorth regional commander, every supply base, every communication hub, and every strategic facility in the collective. Lieutenant Grace Taylor coordinated psychological operations that began broadcasting messages directly into Vorth communication networks. The messages were simple: surrender now or face complete annihilation. The humans provided detailed evidence of their capabilities, including recordings of what had happened to Vorth forces that chose to resist. But the most frightening change was in the human strike teams themselves. Sergeant Bob Chen and Staff Sergeant Patricia Moore began leading operations that targeted not just military installations, but the entire infrastructure that supported Vorth civilization. The first indication of this new phase came from the Vorth industrial world of Nexus 4, home to 50 million Vorth civilians and the primary manufacturing center for their military equipment. The planet was heavily defended and considered impregnable. On a Tuesday morning, every power plant on Nexus 4 simultaneously shut down. Not destroyed by bombs or damaged by sabotage, just shut down. The automated systems simply stopped working, as if someone had flipped a switch. By Tuesday evening, the planet's water treatment facilities had stopped functioning. Food distribution networks collapsed. Transportation systems ground to a halt. Communication networks failed one by one. The Vorth garrison tried to respond, but they found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see or locate. Their soldiers would wake up to find their weapons had been disassembled during the night. Officers would discover their command centers empty of all personnel, with no sign of struggle or violence. Within a week, Nexus 4 was completely paralyzed. 50 million Vorth civilians were without power, water, or food. The military garrison had effectively ceased to exist, not through battle casualties but through systematic elimination of their ability to function as an organized force. The same pattern began repeating across Vorth space. Not just military targets, but the entire civilization began shutting down piece by piece. Power grids failed. Supply chains collapsed. Government buildings emptied overnight. The humans had moved beyond warfare into something that resembled the systematic dismantling of an entire species' ability to maintain modern society. Supreme Commander Vorthtel tried desperately to coordinate a response, but his communication networks were compromised. His regional commanders stopped reporting in. His supply lines disappeared. Even his own headquarters began experiencing mysterious failures of essential systems. The psychological impact was devastating. The Vorth Collective was a hierarchical society that depended on central coordination and clear chains of command. Without reliable communication or predictable supply lines, individual Vorth units began making independent decisions. Many chose to surrender. Others simply abandoned their posts and tried to return to their home worlds. Captain Danny Wright and Lieutenant Susan Park coordinated the human response to Vorth surrender attempts. Unlike the Federation's complex prisoner processing protocols, the human approach was simple. Immediate surrender resulted in humane treatment and protection. Continued resistance resulted in the complete elimination of the unit's ability to function. Word spread quickly through Vorth forces that humans kept their promises. Surrendering troops were treated well, fed properly, and allowed to communicate with their families. But units that chose to fight found themselves facing something beyond their understanding of warfare. The turning point came when Regional Commander Vorth Hess, responsible for 7 star systems, attempted to contact Colonel Blake directly. The communication reached the human fleet through channels that bypassed all known Vorth security protocols. Human Commander Blake, the message began. I am Vorth Hess, Regional Commander of Sector 7. I wish to discuss terms of surrender for my forces. Blake's response was immediate and direct. Unconditional surrender of all Vorth forces in your sector. Immediate cessation of civilian executions. Full cooperation with Federation civilian rescue operations. And in return, your people live. Your worlds continue to function. Your civilization survives. What guarantee do we have?